The night was cold, and the colony lay silent under a blanket of heavy clouds. Rain tapped against the metal roof of John's small workshop house, a steady sound that usually gave him comfort. But tonight felt different. The power lines flickered now and then, the storm stronger than usual. The air smelled of wet earth and iron, and the silence of the empty colony street outside pressed against his walls like a weight. John sat at his table fixing an old tool with tired hands when it happened. 3 sharp knocks at the door. He froze. At this hour, no one visited. The colony usually slept early, and he lived on the edge, away from most houses. For a long moment, John just stared at the door, listening. Another knock came, weaker this time, like someone who had no strength left. His heart quickened. Who could it be? A traveler, a thief, or something worse? Slowly, he stood and walked to the door. He hesitated before opening it, his hand resting on the lock. The storm outside growled with thunder, and for a second he thought about ignoring the sound. But the knock came again, softer, desperate. Against his better judgment, he pulled the door open. What he saw made his breath catch. There in the rain stood a woman. Not human. Her skin glowed faintly under the stormlight, a pale silver shimmer that marked her as alien. She was tall, but her body shook with exhaustion. Her clothes, or what remained of them, were nothing more than a torn piece of cloth wrapped around her like a desperate shield. Her hair was wet, sticking to her face, and her eyes were wide with fear. She swayed as if she might fall. John instinctively reached out, catching her before she collapsed onto the floor. Her skin was cold, trembling, but alive. For a moment he only stared at her, unable to understand why an alien woman had appeared at his door in the middle of the storm. "Please," she whispered, her voice soft and broken. The word was strange, but close enough to human tongue that he understood. "Hide me." John's heart pounded in his chest. His mind shouted warnings. He knew the laws. Aliens were not supposed to be here, not like this, not without clearance. Harboring one could mean punishment, even death. But looking at her now, so weak, so desperate, he could not bring himself to close the door. He pulled her inside. She stumbled across the floor, leaving wet footprints, and collapsed against the wall. John shut the door quickly, locking it again as the storm roared outside. For a moment, silence filled the room, broken only by her shallow breaths and the hum of the weak light above. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice low but sharp. He kept his distance, watching her closely. The woman lifted her head slowly. Her eyes, strange glowing blue with a depth that seemed endless, met his. She tried to speak, but the words came out broken, mixed with a language he did not know. Finally, in a trembling voice, she whispered again, "Safe. Need safe." John frowned. His instincts told him to push her away, to report this to the colony guards at once. But another part of him, a quieter but stronger part, could not. She looked too fragile, too frightened. He saw bruises on her arms, strange scars like burns. Someone had hurt her. He sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. "All right," he muttered, more to himself than to her. "You can stay, just for the night." Her eyes softened, a hint of relief passing over her face. She nodded slowly, almost collapsing again. John moved quickly, helping her to a chair by the table. He grabbed an old blanket, wrapping it around her thin frame. She shivered still, but the warmth seemed to calm her. For a while, neither of them spoke. John poured her a cup of water, setting it in front of her. She reached out with trembling hands and drank slowly, her gaze never leaving his face. He could feel her watching him, studying him, as if deciding whether he could be trusted. When she finally spoke again, her voice was barely more than a whisper. "They follow. Danger, please." John stiffened. His eyes flicked to the window to the storm outside. Who was following her? Soldiers? Criminals? Something worse? His stomach tightened as unease crept through him. He knew he should ask more, demand answers. But he also knew the truth might change everything. The storm raged on, the thunder echoing like distant war drums. Somewhere in the night, John thought he saw faint lights flicker beyond the trees. Maybe it was only lightning, or maybe something else. He turned back to her. She sat there, wrapped in his blanket, her eyes heavy with exhaustion but still alert, still filled with fear. And in that moment, John realized his life had changed. Whatever secret she carried, whatever danger followed her, it was now at his door. The knock at midnight was not just a call for help. It was the beginning of something far greater, something that could pull him into a conflict he never wanted. And deep inside, John knew there was no turning back. The storm passed by morning, but the uneasy silence remained. John had not slept much that night. Each time thunder shook the roof, he woke and checked the alien woman sitting on the chair. She had drifted into a restless sleep, shivering under the blanket he had given her. Even in sleep, she looked hunted, her face tense as if shadows chased her through dreams. When dawn finally arrived, pale light filtered through the cracked window of his workshop house. John brewed himself a small cup of bitter tea, his eyes never leaving her. She stirred at the smell, slowly opening her strange glowing eyes. For a long moment the two simply stared at each other. She looked weak but alive. He felt relief mixed with worry. "Morning," John said softly, though he knew she might not understand. He pushed a cup of water toward her. She took it with trembling hands, drinking slowly. Her movements were cautious, like a wild animal, unsure if the hand feeding it could also strike. She did not speak much. The few words she tried were broken. Fragments of English twisted through her alien tongue. "Safe, not safe," she whispered at one point, shaking her head. "They does come," John frowned. "Who comes?" he asked firmly. But she only lowered her gaze, refusing to answer. Her silence was not just from fear. It felt like she carried something too heavy to share. He noticed marks on her skin. Symbols burned faintly into her arms and shoulders, glowing slightly in the morning light. Not natural marks. They looked like branding or some kind of alien script. When he reached out, curious, she flinched and pulled the blanket tighter around herself. "All right," John muttered, raising his hands. "I won't touch. But you've got to tell me something." "Why my door? Why me?" She only stared, her lips pressed into a thin line. Then very slowly she touched her chest and whispered one word. "Hunted." John's stomach sank. He had guessed as much the night before, but hearing her say it made it real. Hunted. By who? And why? The day dragged on with tension pressing between them. John tried offering her food, bread, dried fruit, a bit of stew. She ate carefully, each bite slow as though she hadn't tasted real food in days. He noticed her scars more clearly now. Some were fresh, angry red lines across her back and arms, others old and faded. Whoever had chased her had not been kind. Outside, the colony carried on as usual. Children ran through puddles left by the rain. Traders opened their stalls and workers marched to the fields. Yet John felt cut off from it all, locked inside with his strange guest. He thought about going to the guards, but every time he looked at her, fragile, terrified, clinging to silence, he stopped himself. She didn't look like a criminal. She looked like a victim. That afternoon, she surprised him. As John sat fixing a broken tool, she rose quietly from the chair. Her steps were unsteady, but she moved with surprising grace for someone so weak. She walked over to his workbench, touching the scattered metal pieces with careful fingers. Then she picked up a small device, a scanner he used for machine parts. "No," John said quickly, reaching for it. But before he could stop her, she pressed the device against her arm. The screen lit up with strange symbols, unreadable to him. Her glowing eyes narrowed as she read them. Then she dropped the scanner back on the table with trembling hands. "What did it say?" John demanded. She only whispered one word again. "Track." Cold ran through his veins. Track? Did that mean she was carrying something inside her? Or was she being traced right now? He glanced toward the window nervously. The colony was calm, but his gut told him the peace would not last. That night when darkness fell again, John tried to sleep. But his mind was restless. He could hear her soft breathing across the room, see the faint glow of her skin even in the shadows. He turned over and over, questions tearing at him. Who was she? Why was she hunted? And what danger had he invited into his home? Suddenly a cry broke the silence. John jumped up, reaching for the lamp. The alien woman was curled against the wall, clutching her head, shaking violently. She cried out in her own language, a sound sharp with terror. Her voice cracked, repeating the same phrase again and again, though John could not understand. Her eyes glowed brighter, tears running down her face. He rushed to her side, unsure what to do. "Hey, it's okay. You're safe here," he said, though his words felt useless. She thrashed for a moment, then collapsed forward, pressing her forehead against his chest. Her body shook with sobs, fragile and broken. John froze, but slowly wrapped his arms around her, steadying her trembling form. "You're safe," he whispered again. "No one's going to hurt you tonight." Her breathing slowed after a while, her cries fading into soft whimpers. She stayed close, as though afraid he would vanish if she let go. And in that moment, John realized something terrifying. He was no longer just sheltering a stranger. He was protecting her, and protection meant risk. Outside, faint in the distance, a strange light flickered in the forest beyond the colony. It was not lightning this time. It was something else, something searching. And John knew. The hunters were closer than ever. The colony woke to a calm morning, but John felt no calm inside. All through the night he had watched the alien woman sleep fitfully, her body shivering, her lips whispering words he could not understand. Every crack of wood in his house, every gust of wind against the window made him tense. He knew danger was moving closer. By midday, the peace of the colony shattered. A deep rumble filled the air. Shadows stretched across the ground as a ship descended from the clouds. Its engines roared like thunder, and dust rose in violent circles as it landed just beyond the colony walls. People stopped what they were doing, staring with wide eyes. Few ships ever came here, and when they did, they rarely came with such force. John stepped outside his door, squinting at the scene. His stomach tightened. The ship was no merchant craft. Its metal hull was dark, armored, marked with symbols that were not human. Doors opened and armored figures marched out. They were tall, covered head to toe in silver suits, their helmets glowing with red lines. Alien soldiers. Their movements were sharp, disciplined, dangerous. The people of the colony gathered, murmuring nervously. Children clung to their parents. Traders shut their stalls. Everyone watched as the soldiers spread across the square. One of them, taller than the rest, raised a device and spoke in a deep mechanical voice that translated into rough English. "Attention, humans. We seek a fugitive, female, marked with silver skin. She is dangerous. She is guilty. Deliver her to us and no harm will come to your colony." A chill ran down John's spine. He didn't need them to say more. He knew exactly who they were looking for. Inside his workshop, the alien woman had hidden herself near the back, trembling under the blanket he'd given her. She peeked through a crack in the door, her glowing eyes wide with fear. She whispered a single word, almost too soft to hear. "Hunters." John's hands curled into fists. So it was true, someone powerful wanted her caught. But why call her dangerous? Why call her guilty? She looked broken, frightened, barely able to stand. What crime could she have committed? The tall soldier continued. "She wears a mark of law. She is property of the Galactic Authority. Harboring her will mean punishment. Death. Do not protect her." The words struck the colony like a blade. People gasped. Some muttered that they had seen strange lights near the forest. Others glanced toward John's house at the edge of the street. He felt their eyes flicker to him, suspicion already blooming. John stepped back into his house, closing the door quietly. He turned to the woman. "They're here for you," he said in a low voice. "Why, what did you do?" She shook her head fiercely, tears filling her eyes. "Not guilty," she whispered. "Lies, chains, escape." John frowned. "Lies, chains?" He thought back to the scars on her arms, the branding marks. His gut told him she was telling the truth, or at least not the whole lie the soldiers wanted people to believe. Still, he was trapped. He paced across the room, his mind racing. If he handed her over, the soldiers would leave and the colony would be safe. If he hid her, the hunters would stay, and sooner or later they would find her. And then, what would they do to him? A pounding knock shook his door. John froze. The alien woman stiffened, her glowing eyes pleading. He motioned for silence and stepped toward the door. When he opened it, 2 armored soldiers stood before him. Their helmets reflected the morning sun, hiding any trace of humanity. One spoke in the same deep metallic voice. "Human, have you seen the fugitive?" John's throat went dry. For a moment he thought of lying. For a moment he thought of stepping aside, pointing them toward the back of his house, letting them take her. That would be simple. That would be safe. But something inside him refused. "No," John said, steadying his voice. "I haven't seen anyone." The soldiers tilted their helmets, studying him. For a long moment the silence burned hotter than the storm had the night before. Then one leaned closer, its voice sharper. "If you hide her, you will die with her." John's heart hammered. But he didn't break. "I said I haven't seen her." The soldiers turned without another word, marching back toward the square. John shut the door quickly, leaning against it. His whole body trembled. He had just lied to alien soldiers armed with weapons that could turn his house to ash. The woman crawled out from her hiding spot, her face pale but her eyes shining with gratitude. "Safe," she whispered. "You." Save me. John shook his head. For now, he muttered. But he knew it wouldn't last. The soldiers were searching every house, every barn, every shadow of the colony. It was only a matter of time before they returned. He looked at her again, at her scars, at the fear in her eyes. She was no criminal. She was running from something bigger, something cruel. And now, by opening his door, he was running too. Outside, the soldiers spread farther, scanning buildings, questioning people. A drone hummed through the air, its red eye glowing as it swept over rooftops. The colony's fear grew thicker by the minute. And in the distance beyond the hills, John thought he saw more ships moving in the clouds. The hunters had arrived, and they would not leave without her. The soldiers stayed in the colony the whole day. Their metal boots clashed against the stone streets as they searched from house to house, barn to barn. Drones buzzed overhead, scanning every shadow. People whispered in fear, some casting nervous glances toward John's workshop house. Rumors traveled fast. Inside, John paced like a caged animal. The alien woman sat silently by the fire, wrapped in his old blanket, watching him with tired eyes. She had not said much since the soldiers arrived. But John noticed something strange. Her gaze always returned to the torn cloth she still clutched tightly, the ragged fabric that had covered her when she first appeared at his door. At first, John thought it was only a scrap, worthless. But the way she guarded it, pressing it close, hiding it when he looked, told him otherwise. Finally, he spoke. "What is it about that cloth? Why do you hold on to it like it's your life?" Her eyes flickered, uncertain. She pulled it closer around her shoulders, shaking her head. John frowned. "Look, if I'm risking everything for you, I need to know why. Those soldiers, they'll kill me if they find you here. I need the truth." For a long moment, silence filled the room. The fire cracked, throwing shadows against the wall. Then slowly, she loosened her grip on the cloth and handed it to him. Her hand trembled as if letting go meant losing everything. John unfolded the fabric carefully. It felt strange under his fingers, not like cotton or wool, but smooth, metallic, alive almost. Thin threads glimmered faintly as if tiny lights were buried deep inside the weave. His mechanic's eyes sharpened. This wasn't clothing. This was technology. He laid it flat on the table. "What is this?" The woman rose, unsteady but determined. She touched one of the glowing threads with her finger. The cloth pulsed, and in an instant light spread across its surface. Symbols appeared, lines of alien script mixed with strange diagrams. They moved and shifted like code unlocking itself. John's breath caught. "It's a datasheet, a memory," she nodded. Her voice was low but steady now, words clearer than before. "Proof. Proof of what?" John asked. She leaned closer, her glowing eyes sharp with urgency. "Galactic law lies, my people." Enslaved cloth has truth. John felt the air leave his lungs. Proof enslaved. He stared at the shifting images on the cloth. Towers of fire, chains, ships dragging prisoners across the stars. He saw rows of her people marked with glowing symbols like the ones burned into her skin. Documents flashed, official seals from the Galactic Authority. Sentences handed down not by justice but by decree. His stomach turned. The woman wasn't just a fugitive. She was carrying evidence that could shatter the authorities' lies. He whispered, "That's why they're hunting you. You escaped with this." She nodded again, her eyes glistening with tears. "I was witness. They kill witness, cloth. Only hope." John sank into his chair, running a hand through his hair. He could barely process it. A secret this big, hidden in a piece of fabric? And now it was on his table. If the soldiers found it, they'd burn him alive before he could speak a word. The woman placed her hand on his arm. Her voice cracked. "You, help please, must send cloth. Before too late." John looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just asking him to hide her anymore. She was asking him to fight against the most powerful force in the galaxy, against a law no human colony dared to question. "I'm just a mechanic," he muttered. "I fix tools, engines, broken machines." "Not this, not wars." Her fingers tightened on his sleeve. "Human heart strong. Stronger than law. Stronger than chains." The word struck something deep in him. He wanted to argue, to deny, but the fire in her eyes wouldn't let him. Suddenly, a loud crash rattled the walls. John jumped to his feet. Through the window, he saw soldiers forcing their way into the house across the street, dragging the family outside for questioning. One of the children screamed as the drone scanned their home. John's gut clenched. They were getting closer. He turned back to the woman. "If we keep this here, they'll find it. We need to move," she nodded. Tower, old signal tower, east of Colony. From there, can send truth. John knew the place. A rusted communications tower long abandoned, but its core system still pulsed faintly with energy. He had fixed them once, years ago. If she was right, it could send her proof beyond the colony, to other worlds, maybe to those who would listen. But reaching it meant slipping past soldiers, drones and trackers. The woman wrapped the cloth around herself again, pulling the hood of her blanket low. Night, she whispered. We go night. John swallowed hard. Night meant shadows. Shadows meant chance. But it also meant danger. He glanced once more at the glowing threads of the cloth, the proof of crimes carved across the galaxy. He realized then there was no turning back. The moment he opened his door to her, his life stopped belonging to himself. The cloth was no ordinary scrap. It was the weight of truth. And truth, he now understood, was the most dangerous weapon in the universe. Night fell heavy over the colony. The air was damp, the streets empty, but the hunters did not rest. Their glowing helmets moved like cold stars in the dark, scanning every corner. Drones hummed above, red eyes sweeping across rooftops. The colony had turned into a cage, and John knew the walls were closing fast. Inside his workshop, he packed quickly. Water, tools, a lantern. His hands shook, but his mind was sharp. He had done dangerous work before, repairing broken generators with live sparks, crawling through collapsed tunnels, but this was different. This was not a machine he could fix. This was a war creeping to his door. The alien woman stood near the window, her silver skin faint under the lantern light. She had wrapped the cloth around herself again, hiding its glow, but her eyes still shone with quiet fire. She spoke softly, her broken words more steady now. We must move. Tower waits, soldiers. Not stop until we gone, John nodded. We'll use the tunnels. Old smuggler routes under the colony. They don't know about them. Her head tilted slightly, curious. No secret paths. John allowed a faint, humorless smile. Every mechanic does. We fix more than machines. We fix mistakes they slipped into the night. The colony lay in silence, but silence was dangerous. Every step felt like walking on glass. John led her through alleys, his eyes darting to every shadow. Twice they ducked behind walls as soldiers passed by, their boots clicking like drums of war. Once a drone hovered above them, its red light sweeping low. The woman pressed close against John, her body tense, her breath shallow. He held her still until the drone moved on. Finally, they reached a rusted grate behind the workshop. John pried it open, the metal groaning, and motioned for her to enter. The tunnel beyond was narrow, damp, and dark. She crawled inside first, then John followed, closing the grate behind them. The air was thick underground. The walls were damp stone, the floor mud. John lit his lantern, its weak flame pushing back the blackness. The tunnels had been carved long ago, when smugglers used them to move goods past colony guards. Most people had forgotten them, but John remembered. They moved slowly, their footsteps echoing softly. The woman kept glancing over her shoulder, as if expecting shadows to follow. At one point she stopped, her hand against the wall, her eyes glowing brighter. What is it? John whispered. She shook her head, listening. Voices above, soldiers close. John stiffened. He held his lantern low and pulled her forward. Then we don't stop. Hours seemed to stretch as they crawled deeper into the earth. At times the tunnel narrowed so much John's shoulders scraped against stone. The woman moved with surprising grace despite her weakness, her movements quiet and careful. But fear hung between them like heavy smoke. Then, without warning, the lantern flickered and died. Darkness swallowed them whole. John cursed under his breath, shaking the lantern, but it was no use. The flame was gone. He felt a soft hand touch his arm. Her voice whispered in the dark. Not fear. I see. Before he could answer, her skin glowed faintly, her silver light spreading just enough to reveal the tunnel ahead. The glow came from within her, gentle but steady, guiding their path. John stared for a moment, awed. You're glowing, she gave a small, sad smile. Gift curse, always they see me, always they hunt. His chest tightened at her words. She carried her own beacon, her own trap. No matter where she ran, she could never truly hide. They pressed on. Finally, after what felt like hours, the tunnel sloped upward. A ladder led to a rusted hatch. John climbed first, pressing his ear against the metal. Silence above. Carefully, he pushed it open. Cool night air rushed in. They emerged into the forest east of the colony. The sky above was clear, stars scattered like diamonds. For a moment the air felt free, but freedom was short. A sharp hum cut through the night. John looked up and froze. A drone floated above the trees, its red eye fixed on them. "Run!" he shouted. The woman grabbed his hand, and together they sprinted into the forest. Branches whipped their faces, roots caught their feet, but they did not stop. Behind them the drone whirred louder, signaling. In the distance, shouts echoed. Soldiers were coming. The woman stumbled, but John pulled her forward. "Keep moving!" he yelled. Her eyes glowed brighter, her body pulsing with strange energy. She whispered words in her tongue, and suddenly the ground behind them shuddered. Roots twisted upward, snapping through the soil, tangling across the path. The drone crashed into them with a crack of metal. John's eyes widened. "You can do that?" She gasped, exhausted. "Only little. Power weak. They ran until their lungs burned. Finally, they collapsed near the edge of a clearing. Ahead, in the distance, stood the shape of the old signal tower. Tall, broken, but still reaching for the stars. John lay on the ground, gasping for air, sweat dripping down his face. The woman knelt beside him, clutching the cloth, her glowing eyes fixed on the tower. "We close," she whispered. "Tomorrow, truth goes free." But John's gaze drifted back toward the forest. Red lights flickered between the trees, moving closer, spreading like fire. The escape was not over. The hunters were still on their trail, and the night had only just begun. The night stretched long and cruel. John and the alien woman stayed hidden near the clearing, the old signal tower looming in the distance like a broken guardian. Its metal frame leaned with age, wires dangling like vines, but its heart still pulsed faintly with power. John could feel it. The tower still lived, waiting to be woken. The woman held the cloth close, whispering to herself in her strange tongue. Her glowing eyes stared at the tower with hope and fear mixed together. She believed salvation rested inside those rusted beams. But John's thoughts churned with doubt. They were not alone anymore. Word of the fugitive had spread through the colony. Some people were whispering in secret corners. Some wanted her turned in to protect their families, and some, very few, were willing to help. John knew he couldn't reach the tower without allies. The hunters were everywhere, and alone he and the woman would be caught before dawn. That was why, at midnight, John led her to an old barn at the edge of the forest. Inside, waiting in the shadows, were 3 figures, humans he trusted. "Old friends, John," one of them said, a tall man with scars across his jaw. His name was Mason, once a miner, now a smuggler. He had carried contraband through these tunnels for years. "What have you gotten yourself into this time?" John hesitated, then pulled the woman forward. Her silver skin glowed faintly, even in the dark. Mason's eyes widened and the other stiffened. "She's the one," John admitted. "The one the soldiers want." "You're mad," hissed a woman named Lyra, her voice sharp. "Do you have any idea what you've done? If they find her with you, they'll burn the whole colony." John stood firm. "She's not what they say. She's no criminal. She's a witness. She has proof." He placed the cloth on the table. As the fabric spread, light rippled across it. Images appeared again. Chains, fires, prisoners dragged from their homes. Documents stamped with the mark of the Galactic Authority. The room fell silent. Mason leaned closer, his eyes hard. "God, is this real?" The alien woman spoke then, her voice trembling but steady. "My people, innocent. Authorities say guilty. But laws lie, cloth, truth." The third figure, a younger man named Theo, swallowed hard. "If this gets out, it could change everything. But John, if we help her, we bring the authorities' wrath on all of us." Lyra slammed her fist on the table. "This isn't our fight. We're human. We don't owe her anything." The woman flinched at the words, clutching the cloth tighter. John felt anger burn in his chest. "We do owe her. She came to us for help. And what are we if we turn her away?"
Just another set of cowards hiding under the authorities' chains?
Silence hung heavy after his words. Mason looked from John to the alien woman, then back to the glowing cloth. His scarred jaw tightened. Finally he spoke. "If what she carries is real, it's bigger than this colony. Bigger than all of us. But helping her means war." "Are you ready for that, John?" John hesitated. He thought of his quiet workshop, his tools, the life he had built in the colony. All of it could be burned to ash if he chose wrong. But then he looked at the alien woman, her glowing eyes filled with desperation, and he remembered the night she knocked on his door, broken, trembling, begging only for safety. "I'm ready," John said, his voice firm. I won't hand her over. The alien woman's lips trembled. She whispered, Thank you. Lyra cursed under her breath, but Mason raised a hand. Enough. If we do this, we do it smart. The tower is crawling with soldiers. We'll need a distraction. Theo nodded quickly. I can rig charges at the west gate. Draw them out. But once that cloth signal goes out, we'll all be targets. John's jaw tightened. Then we hold them off long enough. Just one transmission. That's all she needs. The plan formed in the dark, built on desperation and hope. The colony itself had become divided, some whispering to side with the soldiers, others quietly offering food and shelter. Humanity stood at a line, and each person had to choose which side of it to stand on. As the night waned, John sat near the woman, watching her cradle the cloth like a sacred treasure. She looked at him suddenly, her eyes glowing faint in the firelight. If I fail, she whispered, pressing the cloth into his hands. You must destroy it. Better ashes than chains, John shook his head. No, you're not going to fail. We'll get you to that tower. Her gaze lingered on him, full of both hope and sorrow, as though she already knew the cost of what lay ahead. Outside, the forest stirred with movement. Red lights flickered between the trees. The hunters were coming closer, their circle tightening. John stood, gripping the cloth in one hand, his jaw set. Humanity had been given a choice, silence or truth, fear or defiance, chains or freedom, and by dawn, that choice would be carved into the stars. Dawn broke with a pale red glow, but there was no peace in the light. The forest east of the colony stirred with movement, and the sound of metal boots carried through the trees. The hunters were closing in. From the clearing, the old signal tower stood tall against the morning sky, broken yet unbending. Its rusted frame stretched high, wires hanging loose like dead vines, but deep inside, power still pulsed. The tower was waiting. John tightened the straps of his pack and looked at the woman. Her silver skin glowed softly in the morning light, her eyes bright with resolve. She clutched the cloth close to her chest. Today, she whispered, truth goes free. Mason, Lyra, and Theo stood with them. Each carried weapons scavenged from the colony, rifles, knives, even old explosives. None of them looked fearless, but all of them stood ready. This is madness, Lyra muttered, checking her rifle. They'll crush us before we even reach the tower. Then we don't give them time, Mason said firmly. His scarred jaw was set, his eyes cold. Theo, when we hit the ridge, light up the charges. Draw them west. John, you get her to the tower? That's all that matters, John nodded. His heart pounded, but his resolve was set. They moved quickly, weaving through the forest. The woman stayed close to John, her breath steady despite the danger. But as they broke from the trees, the hunters descended. Shadows fell as ships roared above, sleek and armored. Drones swarmed like angry insects, red eyes scanning the ground. Soldiers advanced in lines, their helmets glowing with cruel light. Now, Mason roared. Theo pressed the detonator. Explosions thundered across the western ridge, fire and smoke bursting skyward. The forest shook and the hunters turned, their formation breaking as they rushed toward the blast. Go! Mason shouted, firing into the advancing line. Bullets sparked against alien armor, but the humans fought with fury, not fear. John grabbed the woman's hand and sprinted toward the tower. Drones swooped low, beams of red cutting the air. He fired his old pistol, the shots wild but enough to force them back. The woman raised her free hand, her eyes glowing brighter. Roots and vines ripped from the earth, striking at the soldiers behind them. Her body trembled with the effort, but her powers bought them seconds. Seconds were all they needed. They reached the base of the tower. Its metal doors groaned as John shoved them open, dragging her inside. The air smelled of rust and dust, but the faint hum of machinery pulsed through the walls. He turned to her, breathless. Can you do it? She nodded, clutching the cloth. Together they climbed the winding stairs, each step echoing with the pounding of their hearts. Outside, the battle raged, Mason shouting, Lyra firing, Theo's explosives tearing the ground apart. The colony was awake, some joining the fight, others hiding in fear. Humanity was choosing each soul in their own way. At the top of the tower, the old transmitter stood like a dying beast. Its panels flickered weakly, sparks jumping across broken wires. John hurried to the console, pulling tools from his pack. His hands worked fast, reconnecting circuits, forcing the old machine back to life. The woman spread the cloth across the console. Light burst from it, symbols spilling into the transmitter's core. The machine whined, groaned, then roared awake, its antenna stretching to the sky. "It's working," John shouted. But before relief could sink in, the door below shattered. Soldiers stormed inside, their boots clanging as they climbed the stairs. "They're coming," John yelled. The woman stood tall, her eyes blazing. "Keep sending." "I hold them." "No," John growled. "Not alone." The first soldier burst onto the platform, weapon raised. John fired, the recoil jarring his arm, the shot slamming into the soldier's chest. Another came, then another. The platform filled with chaos, bullets, sparks, alien roars. The woman unleashed her power, her body glowing like a star. Vines burst through the tower walls, steel groaned as roots coiled around soldiers, dragging them screaming into the air. She cried out with the effort, but she did not stop. John fought at her side, his pistol smoking, his body bruised. He felt the heat of laser fire searing past, the sting of shrapnel on his skin. But still he stood. The transmitter wailed as the signal grew stronger. Across the galaxy, the cloth's truth was breaking free. Chains, fires, names of the innocent, records of crimes. The authorities' lies were unraveling. Almost, John shouted. "Just a little longer." The woman staggered, blood on her lips, but her eyes burned brighter than ever. She clutched the cloth, pressing it into the transmitter one final time. The tower shook, its lights blazing as the signal launched into the sky, racing beyond the clouds, beyond the stars. "It's done," she whispered, her knees giving out. John caught her, pulling her close as soldiers swarmed the platform. He raised his pistol with his last bullet standing over her like a shield. "You'll have to kill me first," he snarled. But then a new sound filled the air, a horn deep and thunderous. From the forest, human voices rose in a battle cry. Colonists charged with rifles, blades, even farming tools, striking at the soldiers with raw defiance. Mason's voice bellowed through the chaos. "Humans don't bow!" The hunters faltered, pressed back by fury they hadn't expected. Humanity had made its choice. As the soldiers retreated to their ships, the woman leaned weakly against John. "You protect me," she whispered. "Human heart. Strong?" John looked at the sky where the signal burned like fire across the stars. "No," he said quietly. "We protect the truth." The dawn rose fully then, painting the battlefield in gold. The tower stood scarred but victorious. The truth was free, but John knew this was only the beginning. The Galactic Authority would never forgive, and humanity had just declared war.